Welcome to Betrayal Narrative X.
When I entered the house, I was immediately alerted to something elusive. It wasn't a smell or a sound, it was more like space had shifted a little, leaving a faint trace behind. Things were still in place, but the air was somehow unsettling. I'd never believed in intuition, but that night it was like it was screaming in my ear. Something was wrong. Let's get acquainted. Write in the comments what city and country are you from. You're early, said Charlotte coming out of the kitchen. I looked at my watch. It wasn't that early, just 15 minutes earlier than usual. But there was more than surprise in her voice. A slight tinge of tension. She was in her usual home attire, a loose t-shirt and short shorts. But something was wrong. I looked closer, trying to catch a glimpse of what it was. And then it hit me. The lack of underwear on the shorts. Charlotte always wore it at home, even under the lightest of clothes. It was one of her habits I knew all too well. When she got out of the shower, she always wore panties. When she changed into pajamas, she still wore them. It was a part of her routine comfort that she treated almost ritually. But now they weren't. What's the matter? She asked, noticing my stare. Nothing, just, you're acting weird, I replied. She grinned, but too unnaturally. I'm just tired. It's been a long day. I walked into the bedroom and took a quick look around. Everything looked normal, but the linens looked a little more disheveled than they should have. I checked the bathroom. The towel was dry. If she had just showered, it would be damp. There were too many little things that didn't add up. When I returned to the living room, I saw that Charlotte was already sitting on the couch sipping wine. You always look like that when in doubt, she said with a lazy smile. And how often do I have to doubt? She hummed but didn't answer. I sat down across from him and, as if casually, asked, "What are you doing out of your underwear today?" She froze for a second. The wine glass hovered in the air, but after a moment she smiled. It's hot. That would be the perfect answer. Simple. Logical. If it weren't for one thing. It was cool in the house. The air conditioner had been running all day. And that's when I realized that my first feeling wasn't wrong. Something was really wrong here. I got up from the couch, pretending to go to the bedroom, but actually listening intently for any sounds in the house. The bedroom looked familiar, but I couldn't help but think that someone else had been here recently. A slight crease in the sheets, the faint smell of someone else's cologne that shouldn't have been there. Charlotte never used men's scents, and I always left my bottle in the same place. I opened the closet and examined the shelves. Everything's in place. Then I looked under the bed, realizing I was being paranoid, but I didn't find anything unusual. Then I decided to check the bathroom. The door was ajar, and I cautiously peered inside. The towels were hanging as they always did, but one thing made me suspicious. The trash can was empty. Charlotte rarely took out the trash in the bathroom. Usually I did, but today it looked like it had just been cleaned. I went back into the living room again, studying the expression on her face. She took a few sips of wine, then licked her lips, clearly trying to look relaxed. "Is everything all right? You're acting weird," she asked, tilting her head to the side. I nodded, sitting back down on the couch, but I didn't say anything. I wasn't going to jump right back at her with accusations. If something really happened, I'd have to figure out exactly how she was going to get out of it. "Why don't you tell me what's bothering you?" she continued, her lips tightening. "Do you always change so quickly after a shower?" Charlotte froze for a second, then laughed. "What's the question? Sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's not. What's the difference?" I shrugged, pretending I wasn't interested in the conversation anymore. But inside I was seething. She was acting overly confident, but there was something strained in that confidence. It was as if she'd rehearsed her answer beforehand. I shifted my gaze to her phone, which was on the table. "Have you texted anyone today?" "What am I supposed to report now?" "Just asking." She took another sip of wine and leaned back on the back of the couch. "Jessica, we were discussing tomorrow's meeting." Jessica was her co-worker, and I knew they did text sometimes, but Charlotte always left the notifications on. Today, her screen was silent. I decided to change tactics. "Why don't we go somewhere this weekend?" I asked. She raised her eyebrows, but nodded almost immediately. "That's a good idea. Haven't been out in a while." Her voice was steady, but her eyes showed a slight worry. She was waiting for me to push. But I wasn't going to give her that chance. I got up and headed for the hallway, supposedly just to change, but instead I turned toward the balcony. I wanted to check one small detail. Opening the glass door, I looked around. No sign of him. But when I looked down, I noticed that the grass under our balcony was a little crumpled, as if someone had recently stood there or even jumped down. Stupid? Maybe. But the longer I watched that trail, the clearer I realized I wasn't wrong. Back in the living room, I saw that Charlotte was now looking at me with a slight wariness. It's like you're looking for something. Maybe. She hummed and sipped her wine again. You can be weird sometimes, you know? I pretended like nothing else was bothering me. If Charlotte's hiding something, I don't have to rush to judgment. Just watch, memorize the details, and wait for her to make a mistake. People who have something to hide often make mistakes when they think they're safe. Let's not ruin the evening, I said, sitting back down on the couch. She obviously didn't see it coming. Prepared to be interrogated, to be irritated, to be asked further questions, but not to just let the situation go. Her eyes flickered a little, but she pulled herself together. That's the right thing to do. Let's just have a normal time, she replied, relaxing a little. I nodded and turned on the TV. The screen flashed with images from some sitcom, but I couldn't hear a word of it. My mind was preoccupied with one thing: how to catch her in a lie without exposing herself. I glanced stealthily at her phone. It was still on the table, but now it was upside down. She'd never done that before. Charlotte wasn't the type to hide correspondence, but if she was suddenly doing it, she had a reason. How's Jessica doing, by the way? It's the same old thing. A lot of work, says she's tired. The answer sounded convincing, but too formulaic. It was as if she were repeating something prepared in advance. I didn't broach the subject. Instead, I just sat down next to him, as if I'd completely forgotten about my suspicions. After a few minutes, Charlotte reached for her phone, took one look at the screen, and immediately turned it off, without even going into the messages. So she's expecting something, but she's afraid I'll see it. I remained completely calm, but inside I was already forming a plan. The next day, when I left for work, I discreetly took her old cell phone, which she hardly ever used. It was in the closet, and I was sure she wouldn't even remember it. This phone was tethered to her cloud, which meant if I was lucky I could see her messages. In the office, I couldn't concentrate on business. My mind kept going back to last night, to her wary glances and overly thoughtful answers. Toward lunchtime, I took the time to check my phone. I opened it and logged into her iCloud account, using a password I'd known for a long time. Charlotte rarely changed her passwords because she was too lazy to memorize new ones. I opened her correspondence. Most of the messages were boring and mundane: conversations with girlfriends, work, correspondence, discussion of shopping. But one name caught my attention: Andrew. I skimmed through the correspondence, and everything became very clear. All clear, he's gone. We almost got burned yesterday. He was checking everything. I think he suspected something. Charlotte was cheating after all. I wasn't going to make a scene. I didn't want loud accusations, hysterical arguments, or pathetic excuses that Charlotte would use to cover up her guilt. I didn't need her apologies of regret or promises that it wouldn't happen again. I was going to make her feel every second of her betrayal on her own skin. I walked out of the office and got into my car. A plan was already forming in my head. First, I had to find out more about her lover. I reopened her correspondence with Andrew. His phone number was in her contacts, and in a couple of messages, she'd called him by his last name, Carlisle. That was enough. I went on Facebook and typed in his name. Found his page after a couple minutes. The guy looked ordinary. 30-something, short blonde hair, athletic build, harmless face with a good-natured smile. There's plenty of guys like him. I flipped through his photos, marked places of friends. He worked at a small real estate firm, lived alone, and apparently hung out at the gym a lot. Under one of the photos, I saw a familiar comment from Charlotte. What gorgeous form. Coach or natural talent. I shuddered in disgust. How much more dirt have I not seen? I went back to their correspondence and checked the latest messages. He leaves at 7 o'clock. I'll tell you when it's okay. I think we should be careful he suspected something. You're so hot I can't wait. But instead of pain, I felt an absolute icy calm. I looked at the clock, and it was 3:30. Judging from past messages, Charlotte most often scheduled his appointments in the afternoons, when I was at work. If their habits haven't changed, he should be showing up at our house pretty soon. So I figured I'd meet them this time. I arrived home at 4:10 p.m. on purpose, giving them time to feel relaxed enough. As I drove up to the house, I saw an unfamiliar car in the parking lot. It was a gray Ford parked in the shade of the trees, so as not to be conspicuous. Cautious means he knows he's doing something wrong. I turned off the engine and closed the doors quietly. I didn't need them to hear me before I did. Walking up to the second floor, I went to the front door and listened. Silence, but not the kind that happens when no one's home. It was a tense silence filled with muffled sounds. I slowly turned the knob and pushed the door open. They didn't lock it up, thinking I wouldn't come back. I entered the apartment, moving silently, and headed for the bedroom. The door was covered, but not completely. I heard voices. Are you sure he won't find out? Don't be so paranoid. I swung the door open. They didn't even realize what had happened. Andrew twitched trying to grab his clothes, but I had already turned on the camera on my phone. Well, if you were trying so hard, you'd be foolish not to capture it. Charlotte froze. Her eyes widened, her face pale. Shit, Jake, she exhaled, hastily pulling up the sheet. Andrew swallowed and started to babble something, but I held up my hand, stopping him. Sit down, hero. Let's see how good you are at explaining things. He looked like he was ready to fall under the ground. Charlotte grabbed her head, covering her face with her hands. Jake, come on. Let's talk. Oh, I'm all ears. I grinned. Go ahead and surprise me. I looked at Andrew, who was sitting with his head down. You're not saying anything either? I thought you could at least find the words. Okay, so we'll do it another way. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and opened their correspondence. You're so hot I can't wait. How sweet. I read aloud. Charlotte, do you always text your friends like that? She closed her eyes. Jake, please. Oh, no. You just listen to the rest of it. I flipped through the rest of it. I think we should be careful. He suspected something. You're right about that. I did suspect something. Andrew stood up abruptly. Look, I didn't mean to. Shut up. He sat back down, not risking an argument. I took a deep breath and shifted my gaze to my wife. You didn't just cheat on me, I said quietly. You did in my house and my bed. Did you think I wouldn't notice? That I wouldn't realize? She didn't answer. Now, I continued, you will pack your things. Everything that belongs to you will leave this house tonight. Charlotte sobbed. Jake. No, Jake. You're done. You betrayed me. But worse, you thought I was an idiot. I turned to Andrew. And you. You'll find another sponsor for your training. I walked to the living room, sat down on the couch, and opened my phone. I went to Messenger, selected her sister Megan's contact, and started typing a message. Are you home today? I have something I need to discuss. The answer came a minute later. Yes, sure. Is everything okay? I'll tell you when I get there. I put the phone away, listening to the silence in the bedroom. There was still no movement or sound. They were probably trying to process what had happened. After a couple minutes, the door slowly opened and Charlotte stepped out into the hallway. She was dressed in a robe, her hair disheveled, her eyes red. She must have been crying. Jake, she began in a quiet, shaky voice. I didn't answer. I just stared at her, waiting to see what she would say next. I don't know what to say. She licked her parched lips, obviously searching for words. It was a mistake. A mistake? You call that a mistake? She took a hesitant step toward me, but I held up a hand to keep her away. How many times? I asked, looking straight into her eyes. Charlotte averted her gaze. Jake, let's not. How many times? She shuddered, then sighed convulsively. A few, she whispered. How much exactly? 4, maybe 5. What if I asked him? Would he say the same thing? She looked at me sharply, her lips quivered. I don't know. Exactly. You don't even know how far you've come. Jake, I swear it doesn't mean I don't love you. Oh, so you love me too? Oh, that's great. So you cheated on me out of love? That's not true. She sounded hysterical. It was a mistake. I got confused. Confused? I grinned. Confused about what exactly? Taking off your panties in front of another man? I was in a bad way. I lacked attention. And I missed the betrayal. Thank you for fixing that. Jake, please. Give me a chance to explain myself. I don't need to explain anything. It's already very clear. Charlotte rushed over to me, grabbed my arm. Please don't go. I looked at her fingers clawing at me and then pulled her hand away. I'm not leaving because I want to punish you, I said calmly. I'm leaving because I don't want to see you anymore. Charlotte sobbed, covering her face with her hands. I drove through the evening city, watching the sun slowly disappear over the horizon. There was a strange sense of lightness inside, as if with every kilometer that separated me from home, I was shedding invisible chains. Charlotte remained there amidst the scattered belongings and her pathetic excuses. Her tears were her problem now. The phone vibrated in my pocket. I was in no hurry to get it out, but when I looked at the screen at the next stoplight, I saw the name I expected. Charlotte. I sighed and pressed the speakerphone. What do you want? Jake, please don't hang up on me. I know I screwed up, but I love you. Oh yes, I've seen your love in our bed. It was a mistake. Her pathetic, shaky voice again. I don't know what happened to me. You knew, I interrupted her. You made a choice every time you answered his texts. Every time you met him. Every time you opened your legs to him. Charlotte sobbed again, but I didn't feel an ounce of pity. I didn't mean to hurt you. Of course I did. You just wanted to have fun, and my pain is just a side effect. She was silent. I heard her ragged breathing and imagined her sitting in our apartment, clutching the phone in her hand, smearing tears on her face. Give me a chance, she whispered. I'll do anything you say. Okay, I said. Oh, really? Yeah. I nodded, even though she couldn't see it. Right now, go out on the balcony, throw your phone away, and jump on over. She inhaled sharply. Jake, that's all I need from you. Please. I dropped the call. After a couple seconds, the phone vibrated again. Message. I can't be without you. Let's talk. I ignored him. After driving a couple more blocks, I felt the vibration again. I know what I did. But Jake, I only love you. I grinned and tucked my phone into my pocket. She kept writing, but I wasn't going to answer her now that she was nothing to me. I took my time answering her messages. Let her wait. Let every nerve in her body be stretched to the limit while I decided if she was worth anything in my life. There was no pity inside me, not even anger. Just calm calculation and cold satisfaction. If Charlotte is so desperate for a chance, I'll give it to her. Only it will be a chance that will shatter her. I drove to a small diner on the outskirts of town, ordered a coffee, and sat at a table by the window. My phone vibrated again. I know I deserve this, but please talk to me. I'll do anything you say. Let me at least try to make it right. I took a sip of coffee and took my time typing out a reply. Are you really willing to do anything? The answer came instantly. Yes. Anything. Just tell me what to do. I allowed myself a chuckle. All right, I'll tell you, but it won't be easy. She immediately replied, I'm not afraid of hardship. Just tell me what to do. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the screen. Her desperation was literally pouring out of every message. She was hooked now. I could pull the strings and she would dance to my tune. But I didn't want to just humiliate her. I wanted her to feel everything I felt, to burn in her the same helpless, corrosive feeling that tore me apart when I first realized she was no longer in my life. I typed out a message, then come to my house, alone, and don't ask questions. The answer came instantly. I'm on my way out. You don't know what's in store for you yet, Charlotte. I came home and tidied up the apartment. I put everything away, put my phone on the charger, sat in the chair, and turned on the TV. It was supposed to look like nothing had happened. 40 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I opened the door, and there she was, standing in front of me. Charlotte looked miserable, disheveled hair, red eyes, trembling lips. She was holding a small bag like she was going to move back in. Jake, her voice shook. I nodded, gesturing for her to come in. She walked to the living room and stopped in indecision. Thank you for agreeing to talk. I sat back in my chair, watching her carefully. You know why I called you here, don't you? She nodded, clenching her fingers. Yeah, I want to make it right. I tilted my head to the side, looking into her eyes. What if there's nothing that can be fixed? She flinched, but immediately spoke faster, desperately clinging to each letter. I'll do whatever it takes. Just tell me how I can prove that I love you. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. All right, then prove it. She froze. What? I said prove it. You're saying you'll do anything? That's fine. Then let's start simple. She nodded, swallowing the lump in her throat. Okay. Why? I smiled slowly. Tell me everything. In great detail. She turned pale. Jake, what can't you do? Just now you were willing to do anything. It doesn't matter. Well, it does for me. I crossed my arms over my chest, watching her struggle with inner panic. Either you tell the whole truth, or this conversation ends. She swallowed. Okay. I sat back down, nodding to her. Go ahead. She clutched the hem of her sweater with trembling hands. We met through mutual friends. I just liked him. At first I didn't think it could go that far. Next. She sighed convulsively. We started texting. Then we met a couple times. Where? She closed her eyes. The hotel. I grinned. You do remember that I can see all of your posts, right? She opened her eyes with a flicker of fear in them. Why, yes. Then why are you lying? She shook her head in panic. I'm not lying. I silently picked up my phone, opened her correspondence, and turned the screen to her. You are so hot I can't wait. I read aloud. I love it when you're so wild. She turned even more pale, covering her mouth with her hand. I looked at her with utter indifference. You didn't even try to hide it, Charlotte. You were sure I wouldn't notice. She was silent. So, I continued, getting up from my chair. Now you have two ways. One, you walk out of here now and never come into my life again. She inhaled convulsively. And the other one? I leaned closer. And second one is you stay and tolerate whatever I say. She looked at me with desperate hope. I'll stay. I grinned. Oh, great. Then the game is just beginning. Charlotte stared at me wide-eyed, trying to figure out what was in store for her. There was everything in her gaze. Hope, fear, despair, and a faint, almost childlike faith that I could forgive her. But forgiveness wasn't what she deserved. I wasn't going to forgive her. I wanted her to live her life, waiting for that forgiveness that would never come. I took a step back and slowly sat back in my chair, studying her with my gaze. Okay, Charlotte, you want a chance. You got it. I'll do anything you say, I swear. We'll start simple. You delete Andrew's number right now. That's it. I've done it. I've deleted it for good. I nodded, but there wasn't a shred of trust inside me. She could delete it now, but what would stop her from recording it again in a week? Or a month from now, when her fear had dissipated and her guilty conscience was whispering that he won't find out? Would she? Okay. Cell phone rings, now text him. Which one? I leaned back in my chair and tilted my head to the side. Right. You don't exist for me anymore. I've made a terrible mistake. Don't you ever write to me again. Jake, is this really necessary? You really think you can set conditions? She swallowed nervously and quickly began typing. I watched her carefully, making sure she didn't delete the message as soon as it was sent. After a few seconds, her phone beeped and the message was gone. Now show me the screen. She turned her phone around, showing the text she'd sent. I nodded and got up from my chair, slowly walking across the room. What now? She asked in a trembling voice. Now. I grinned. Now you just live with it. She frowned, not understanding. With what? I stopped and looked her straight in the eye. With the realization that you ruined everything. She shuddered. But if I'm trying to make things right, you can't fix what's already broken, Charlotte. You can glue the pieces back together, but the cracks are permanent. But if I do everything you say, if I prove that you're the one for me, you can try as hard as you want. I'll still never forgive you. She exhaled convulsively with a shake of her head. You can't do that. I can do anything, Charlotte. Just like you could do anything you wanted while I was in the dark. I thought that if I tried hard enough. I interrupted her by raising my hand. That's where you're wrong. You think it's up to you. That if you're obedient enough, submissive enough, desperate enough, you can get me back. But I'm already gone, Charlotte. She closed her eyes, tears streamed down her cheeks. I continued. The only thing you have left now. So I can do anything and it won't change anything. Exactly. She dropped her head as if her strength had finally left her. I watched her, but I didn't feel any pity. All I wanted was for her to feel the way I felt. That every day would be soaked with that sticky, corrosive realization that there was no turning back. I went to the door and opened it. Now go away. But, you said you were giving me a chance. I did. It's just not what you were hoping for. Her lips quivered, but she didn't answer. I pointed to the door again. Go away, Charlotte. She lowered her head, turned around, and staggered toward the exit. I watched her cross the threshold, pausing as if hoping I'd stop her. I closed the door without even waiting for her to leave. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. If you like the story, please give this video a thumbs up and leave a comment below. Your support helps the algorithm show my content more often. If you are new to the channel, do not forget to hit that subscribe button. It really helps me keep making more stories for you.